Welcome to HERPath, the podcast for busy women looking for purpose, health, and happiness. My name is Elise Sinha, and today we're talking about self-coaching. Let's get started. So, all of us are certified coaches, and while we were going through our certification process, we learned a lot about the power of self-coaching. And I come to think of it as a critical skill. It shows us our minds. It shows us how our thoughts can really change our trajectory. And self-coaching is a tool that we can use to make the most out of any of those situations. So before I get started on really what it is and how we use it, I want to ask my friends here, how do you use self-coaching in your day-to-day life, in your business, in your profession? Where does it come up most for you?
Well, for me, I'll start. Every morning I do what I call brain hygiene. I think of it as like brushing my teeth. Like I need to do just to clean out my brain. So I um, just start writing and dumping out all the stuff that's in my brain. Kind of like our mentor Brooke says, cleaning out a purse, just getting everything out and kind of organizing it. And then thinking about my day and what it is that I'd like to accomplish and what do I need to be feeling and thinking in order to get those tasks accomplished. And then there are other days where I just want to put everything back in the purse all messy, and then that's fine and move on with my day.
I love the idea of putting the analogy of the purse. I just love that. Go ahead, Nancy.
I do it at night. I'm very reflective on I look at what the day brought, I responded, what I could have done different. So for me, nighttime reflection works better. I've done it both, and I really like the nighttime. I sit in bed with either my laptop or a journal, and I just kind of write down what happened during the day.
I find that in the morning as I'm getting ready and looking in the mirror, kind of telling myself, what kind of day are we going to have today? And choosing, we're going to have a good day. Everything's, going well. That really helps me kind of get me ready for the day. Usually my weekdays are pretty jam-packed and have a lot of interactions with different types of personalities. So in the morning, I try to, do some self-affirmations for me to get me ready for that day. Because before I leave, I see my husband and the kids, make sure they have, what they need before I leave, know that it's going to be great. Everything's taken care of. And maybe some things are not, but it's okay. Things are going to be fine. You've got this. And then during the day, I do have to have small little kind of self-coaching sessions with myself, which I've gotten much better at doing over time, with your help and with learning about self-coaching techniques through, having a life coach, where if I'm in a situation where it's a difficult encounter, with a patient, I'm a primary care family medicine doctor, do a lot of health coaching, do a lot of weight loss coaching, chronic care coaching during those sessions. But people will unload a lot of, stuff on you. And I have to remember to separate myself from that and coach myself during those moments when I find myself kind of taking in their emotional, physical, baggage. I find sometimes me making it about me, like maybe I didn't do such a great job in, the medication I prescribed, or maybe I missed something, or maybe they're upset with my care, and really reminding myself, girl, it's not about you. Listen to them, be curious about what's going on with them. Let's try to help them figure it out for themselves. And so I do have to have many during the day, small little, self-coaching moments where when I feel myself making the situation about me, like, okay, wait a minute, this isn't about you. This is about, a circumstance that you have no control over. So let's try to help them, figure this out. So I do have to have multiple during the day, small little kind of moments as I'm actually interacting with other people, so that I don't feel the weight of the world, on my shoulders at that moment in time. Because after like 25 sessions, it can be overwhelming.
I love that we all have different ways of incorporating self-coaching into our days and into our lives. So mine's, and I know you guys are gonna laugh at this, but mine's very unstructured and sporadic, and I'm like the least unstructured or sporadic person you know, right? But I try not to force myself into it because I find when I force myself, I'm distracted and I'm not as authentic with myself. I'm not as honest with myself. I usually do some self-coaching when I have an emotion, when I have a feeling. And we know from our training that feeling is a vibration in our body somewhere. So when I get that, I get a feeling, I stop, that's when I stop and pause and I think about, okay, where is this coming from? And what are my thoughts that are contributing to this? And I ask myself the questions that we've all learned. Is this fact or story? What if this is perfect just the way it is? How do I want to be showing up? What is the root cause of this feeling? Um, and I find that that is my most successful self-coaching space is in the heat of the moment, kind of, right? Is when I'm feeling the feels. I love how you all take a more proactive approach to it. And it's something that I've tried in the past, but I love how, like, even Nancy at night, I never would have occurred to me to do some thought work at night. For me, nighttime is relax my brain, do my meditation, that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely going to try that. And Gabby, yours around during the day. That's intriguing to me. Like after X amount of clients or out X amount of meetings, I think that could be helpful too. So I wanted to take this one step forward. So in one of our previous episodes, we talked about our minds being assholes, and we know that they are. And they play tricks on us. They can be really mean to us. They can distort facts. Um, and the root cause of those is always the way we think. Have you women been able to utilize self-coaching to kind of tame that asshole in our mind?
Oh, yes, every day, 100%. Um, for example, a parenting, in a parenting way, when having so I have 3 teenagers and then I have a 6-year-old. So we have a wide spectrum of, you know, interesting personalities and developmentally completely, different. Um, and there'll be times when I'm challenged by, one of the kids, one of the teenagers. And then my brain just starts saying, God, you didn't do, it's terrible. I know. It's like, you didn't do a great job. Why didn't you teach her this? Or why didn't you teach them that? Or you're setting a bad example. And that is such an asshole thing to do to yourself, or to allow my mind, or to believe in it, or to give into it. So when that starts creeping in, that, and you mentioned it, I love it, the feels, when the feels start coming up and I start getting some kind of feeling emotion about it, being aware that it's creeping up, being aware of what thought processes are going through my mind. Because prior to coaching, I only used to think that I was either happy, satisfied, or pissed. There's nothing in between. And it's always everybody else's fault. The reason my dissatisfaction, in life. And so now after coaching, kind of, knowing that my mind is making all this shit up, and I can actually choose whether or not I want to believe and give into it, or I want to examine it and tweak that thinking so that I have a better, understanding of myself and what's going on, and then act in a way that I feel much more, satisfied or at peace with. So with regards to like the parenting thing, I have to give myself some compassion in that moment when maybe things are going so well and I, am being judgmental of myself, to be like, no, it's okay. You did everything right. The kids are going to have their own way of doing things. It's not necessarily bad. Let's just see what happens. You trust that you did the right thing as they were growing up. but that asshole part is always there. But you can get better at dealing and making peace with it, making friends with it, examining that asshole part, because sometimes it is very useful, but other times it's not. It's just mean.
Nancy and Beth, anything to add here around how we tame that asshole in our minds using self-coaching?
I think for me, just knowing it's always going to be there is huge, and being very compassionate with it, because knowing that it only wants to keep you safe, it's got your best interest in mind. So a lot of times I'll kind of talk to it, and I'll say, okay, your point is noted, but we're moving on.
Yeah, I like Nancy, how you said, I think too, just to know that it's always going to be there and that there's nothing wrong with that and to not make it wrong. I find I do struggle a little bit with identifying it, and I find that I do need a personal coach to help kind of call out my own asshole mind on myself. So, yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Self-coaching is not easy, right? It's a skill, it's a muscle that we have to build, and it takes time. And it is the hardest to coach ourselves. But it's a great tool to have in our toolkit, right? So we've been talking a little bit about the negative. Let's flip that. So one of the things that Brooke Castillo, who is all of our mentors and the owner of the Life Coach School, says is when we manage our mind through self-coaching, we can open ourselves up to amazing possibilities. And I love that statement of hers. So next question for you all is give me an example of a time when you've done doing some self-coaching and you had an epiphany or a new idea or an amazing possibility opened up to you.
I'll share an experience of self-coaching in the moment, and I don't know if it created more awareness. I don't know about a possibility or opportunity, but I had the feeling of jealousy come up for me in my relationship. And it just started to bubble up. And in that moment, I was able to take a step back and think about what I was thinking about, and realizing that I was creating that feeling, that there was nothing external that was really happening. It was all in my own head and I was creating it. And being, like Nancy had mentioned, being compassionate with that feeling of jealousy and then holding that space, like it's okay to feel jealous, and kind of flipping that of the reason you're feeling jealous is because you love so fiercely, and if you didn't care, you wouldn't feel this way. And how it eventually just was able to process through and being such a big, huge emotion that I wanted to react to and start pointing fingers and start yelling and being accusational. I was able to just allow it and feel it and have it just like a wave, like wash over me and then just dissolve into like calm and peace. And it was the most just amazing experience, because in the past I would have completely lost my mind and reacted and probably been embarrassed with what I said, what I did, and none of those things were necessary, and it was all in my own mind.
I'm with you there. I have done all the things, have let jealousy rule my life, for specifically with the relationship with my husband. I've been with him forever, since I was 18, 19 years old. So he's the only example that I really have. But on the same level, in the same vein, where self-coaching helped me, because I did start learning and practicing self-coaching was during the pandemic, when we were all closely tied together, and there were so many aspects going on for everyone during that time. But my husband made a comment to me. He says, why don't you look at me the way you look at the kids? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you, what's are you trying to make some drama? We don't have, he's like, when you look at the kids, you look at them like you have sparkles in your eyes. That's how those are his literal words, sparkles in your eyes. I'm like, sparkles. They're like, why don't you look at me like that? Like with sparkles in your eyes, like you do at the kids. And so that kind of caught me off guard. Of course, I got really defensive in the moment. And I'm like, I'm not here to entertain you. I'm not here to look at you and make you all the things. Of course, that just my asshole brain just automatically throws at me and I just go with. But then I did have to sit and reflect and do some coaching with, like, why? What is going on with me? How am I showing up for my husband, who is the love of my life, who is my life partner, the person I trust the most? Why? How am I showing up in and so I took some self-coaching to kind of, I realized that I always automatically go to the negative thinking. Oh, the kitchen is dirty. Why didn't you do the dishes? Or, oh, this wasn't done. Or, oh, look at that outfit that you're wearing. Oh, you didn't put on any. That was what always would go through my mind reflexively whenever I would see him, hear him, talk to him. And so I really had to do some self-coaching to automatically think the positive when I saw him, heard him, interacted with him. And then the sparkles came. Or at least that's what he says. He doesn't complain as much about me having, daggers in my eyes versus sparkles in my eyes. I guess now I'm shooting out sparkles like like a Care Bear. But it took some, time to think about, really, you should be happy that you have me in your presence, was basically what my brain was, telling me. But it took some time to think, this is the love of my life. Why am I not, why isn't that just exuding from my pores when he's in my presence? And so it had to be something that I, intentionally had to work on.
I think your new nickname is Care Bear.
Care Bear. I love it. Care
That's
Bear.
what we're,
Sparkle.
Yeah,
Care
shoot
Bear,
sparkles out.
sparkles in your eyes. Nancy, anything you want to add here?
Well, I'll tell you my example, and this is happened way before coaching, but I really self-coached myself out of an interesting dilemma. I for a long time, about 28 years ago, I lived in a state of anxiety and panic. And like to the point where I couldn't leave my house. It was horrible. It basically hamstrung me totally. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to the store. I couldn't even walk to the mailbox. Those feelings of having anxiety and panic just overwhelmed me. And I found alcohol would soothe it. And I thought, oh boy, this is not good. And so one time I thought, okay, I spend so much energy fighting this panicky feeling. What if I just allowed it and gave into it? And so I made myself a promise that next time that anxiety feeling came, I would just totally open up and ride that wave. I described it as like a tsunami wave coming to wash me away. And I'll never forget, one day it came and I just opened my arms. I laid on the bed and I said, come on. And I let myself feel every single aspect of it. It washed over me and it's never come back. And I thought, oh my gosh, for years I was fighting this feeling. And all it took was allowing the feeling and the sensation to just embrace me, wash over me. I got to know it. I felt it with every cell in my body, and it's never come back. So for me, that was huge.
Wow. And it never came back. That's amazing.
No, it's never come back. And I've even kind of looked for it, at times, but it's never come back. And I think just the process of allowing that feeling to just take hold and instead of trying to push it away and not feel it was like the most incredible revelation I've ever had.
That's funny that you say that, Nancy, because I've had situations like that where they used to be anxiety provoking and paralyzing.
Mhm.
And then over time, allowing them being in that situation, not, really resisting it or, hiding it or denying it. What you mentioned is that I've looked for it and it hasn't been there anymore. I
Yeah.
know what you're talking about because there have been times when I've been in the situation again, and I'm not even really aware of it. But there's a moment where it's like, normally in the situation, I would have been shaking, my heart would have been
Yeah.
racing, my ears would have been ringing.
Mhm.
And now I'm just that's not happening. Like it's amazing. It's almost like a superpower.
It is. It is. But just feeling the feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because initially it feels horrible. I mean, it feels
Yeah.
horrible having that, and you'd rather be doing anything else but feeling that
Exactly.
anxiety or that vibration in the body, but
Yep.
going through it and mastering it, that is definitely a superpower.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it takes trust. You have to trust yourself to be able to feel that
Right.
and go to that really uncomfortable and sometimes scary place, right?
Well, for me, it felt like I was going to die. I mean, I don't know how many times I ran to the ER or to the med center just with this sensation. Being a nurse, you have the tip of the iceberg. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke or a heart attack. And yeah, and just saying, okay, if this is how I'm going to live my life, forget it. I'm gonna just die. And so I was like, take me. If this is it, just take me right now.
Mhm.
And no, just allowing it was probably the biggest gift I've ever given myself because it gave me freedom from it.
So brave. So brave. So I'm going to give an example, and while I do it, I'm going to kind of go through for all of our listeners who are saying, okay, but what is it? Like, what's the brass tacks of self-coaching? So this is an example that happened to me very recently. So I am one of the new things that I'm doing this year is putting out mini courses on my website. So I'm recording them with one of my collaborators, multiple different topics. So we were doing topic, and we were about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through. Um, and two-thirds of the way through the course. So we get on in the morning, and before we got on Zoom, I had checked the recording, how it would record. I had checked the Zoom. I had checked my, my microphone, my video, my everything. We got on, and first of all, the Zoom account wouldn't work. The microphone didn't work. Microsoft Teams would not let me put the PowerPoint, like it was a calamity of errors. And I got so frustrated and so defeated. And in my mind, I'm like, God, you worked in IT for 10 years. This is not rocket science. But I let that take hold of me to the point where it was a horrible recording. I went back and looked at it. And even my colleague, she was like, it wasn't our best, but it'll do. Like that was her nice way of saying, you suck. Or it sucked, right? So I
Mhm.
went back and I looked at it. I'm like, oh my God. But instead of like just railing against technology, I stopped. And I said, all right, what's going on? So Sinha, what is going on? And I stopped and I had a journal sitting here and I just started journaling like all my thoughts, like doing a thought download, right? Just writing out all of my thoughts. And what I came up with was this this unbelievable overwhelm of what I have put on my plate for this year. So, a new podcast, 4 mini courses, offering new retreats, a new coaching circle with new curriculum that I've had to build. A new, I brought on an intern and doing all the work, launching 2 social media pages. When I started really diving into what was causing this feeling, this vibration, it was unbelievable to me. And then from there, I'm like, I'm writing. You're working every weekend. You're working after dinner. You're you're exhausted. You're not, spending enough time with the people you love. Like it all just came out. And I was so shocked by that at first because I was like, wow, I thought this was a reaction to some some technology issues, but really it was the culmination of a lot of things. So I followed the advice that we all teach. I started asking myself. So first I did the thought download, get it all out, right? Unpack the purse, dump the purse out, throw the stuff that's not helping me away, right? You can't do this. What if your coaching circle curriculum fails? What if nobody buys your purse, your mini courses, all the stuff. Did the work of the thought download. And then I started asking myself the questions, right? The questions that we all know and love. this thought you're having, is it a fact or a story? Is it reality or is it something that we've made up in our mind? What if everything's perfect just the way it is? Which is one that I hate to ask myself, but it's my favorite one to ask my clients. I really hate that one. Like, what if it's perfect? No, it's not perfect. I can't even run a Zoom account. I can't even record a session. It's not perfect. But what if it is perfect just the way it is? What if that needed to happen for me to stop and slow down and take a pause, right? How do I want to show up? What do I need to do in order to show up the way I want to? How can I get help? Which is another one I love to ask my clients. I hate to ask myself. And from there, I realized I need rest. I need mental rest, right? Not so much physical rest, although I do need physical rest, but I need the mental rest. I need to just stop and just let my brain have some downtime. And that's what I did. But had I not allowed myself to start the journey of self-coaching, I never would have uncovered all of that. So that's a recent one, but that was so powerful for me. So we've got a few minutes left, and I gave you some of my favorite questions. Is it fact or story? What if this is perfect just the way it is? How do I want to show up? I really wanted to ask all of you, what kinds of questions, self-coaching questions, do you like to ask yourself to bring out what's really happening in your mind?
For me, it's always around my future self. Like, how does she want to show up? What, what does she need? The building the self-trust. I love that one. What does she need? What do I need in this moment? Is always really good for me to ask.
For me, sometimes when I'm doing, those morning affirmations, one of the first feelings I actually feel it first is I may feel it heaviness, like kind of on my chest, or like a feeling of like doom, like I don't know, like something's wrong. And so one of the first things sometimes I'll ask myself if I feel that day is what is actually wrong? Because then when I ask myself that, there really isn't anything wrong. And then from there, I can answer nothing. Nothing's actually wrong. You're okay. Everything is fine. And then I can move on from there to be more intentional with how I choose to feel that day.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. For me, depending on where my headspace is, if I'm struggling with something, the question of if I didn't believe this thought, how would I be different? Or how would the situation be different? That one really is a mind bender in the moment. And I tend to be, action oriented in my morning, like what I want to do. And so the other question that I ask myself in those moments when I'm in that headspace is, how do I need to feel in order to get this done? And yeah, and then coming up with what do you have to think in order to feel that way?
So good.
All great ideas. So thank you, ladies, for sharing all of your examples and your experiences. I hope our listeners, really take away the power of self-coaching. You can do it any way that works for you. As we showed, you can do it in the morning, you can do it at night, you can do it during the day, you can do it when you need to. You can ask yourself any questions that help you get to that root cause, that help turn those thoughts around. You can do a thought download. You can, talk to other people. Self-coaching is what you make of it. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you at our next episode.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.